we were talking about innovation and the way forward for oil and gas industry in Akwa Ibom State. And right about now, we are being joined on this set by a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, a chartered engineer and an oil and gas consultant. He was recently conferred with the Distinguished Fellowship of the Nigerian Institute of Safety Engineers, and of course a division of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. I'm talking about Dr. Wisdom Patrick Enang. Great to have you in our studios.
Thank you very much.
Well, when you walked in, I didn't believe you were from Akwa Ibom. I was thinking you're from, Ijo, Bayelsa, yeah, Ijo man, yeah.
I get the same reactions, Sometimes people ask, what is Tom Polo doing? I'm like, I don't look at anything
no,
like
he's talking about Tom Polo. I was looking at the Asari Dokuba.
Yeah.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Just before you joined us, we tried to create a basis for this conversation. And we did make mention of some few things that Nigeria has done or is doing.
Yeah.
But based on the things we've said, one of the key things was the fact that Nigeria is one of the largest countries in terms of oil and gas reserves in Africa. But the question is, how has this really affected the common man economically?
Not very much, to be honest. And that is because, one, you see, in recent times, the paradigm has shifted from volume-based in the energy sector to value-based. So, while we're still talking about reserves, that reserve doesn't mean anything if you don't harness the reserves in the first instance to get it out of the ground. And also if you don't create the primary and secondary linkages from the petroleum sector. So if you look at it from, a kind of economic standpoint, you only get about 20 to 25% of your money from just economic rents. Across the value chain of processing oil and gas, you'd find that, the about 75% is what you 80% is what you will get from processing the petroleum itself, right? And then utilizing it to power your economy. For example, you hear things like the gas-powered economies in different parts of the world. So we haven't actualized that. So we are just dealing with 20-25%. And that is, I'm trying to explain in an objective term why we haven't harnessed it and why we can't trickle down the effect to the common person. Now think about it, if you're only getting 20-25%, then what you are doing is simply just getting enough people to work in the industry, get the oil off the ground and sell. So take a case study. How many workers can you have in the oil industry versus the population? It's less than 1%, really. So, but if you had a gas-powered economy, or if you had an economy powered by the secondary and primary linkages of the petroleum sector, it could touch more lives. It would go around. So that's why we haven't actually actualized it, because it's not just enough to take the oil and sell. That is a volume-based philosophy. Yeah. The value-based is where you develop the value chain that comes at the back end of that, where you make sure that even the oil you're getting, all oil volumes are equal, but some are more equal than others. And by that, I simply mean, if you're taking oil in Saudi, it's cheaper per barrel than taking it in Nigeria. So you sell at the same price. The cost price is determined by the international fundamentals and dynamics. Now, when you're selling at the same price, the deal breaker is now how much you're actually getting the oil for. How much does it take to get out of the ground? And some countries are lucky in terms of their geophysics because the ground does a lot of work for them, much better than other countries. But then you still sell at the same price. But ours is even plagued by one, the cost of running the industry is very large. Two, there's this aspect of, we're plagued with the lack of reforms that has happened over the decades. Now we're talking about Petroleum Industry Act, which has attempted to do that. So investor confidence is not even there. So, and then three, we are so driven about exploring. Look at all the oil wells we are exploring. These are oil wells in the 30, 40, 50 years ago. Where is no latest data on any reasonable volume being discovered? So there is no exploration. Without that, you keep banking on the old oil wells, which are frankly depleting quickly.
Now, with all these challenges facing the oil industry, some persons have recommended unbundling the NNPC precisely. Would you say that would actually give it a boost in that regard?
Not only is it a recommendation, it is actually one of the implementation mandates of the Petroleum Industry Act. It's meant to do that. And the reason people are saying is one, and then to remove the conflict of interest, where you are an operator and you're also a regulator. That's one. Two, to create transparency in the industry. So that because people would then look at it and say, okay, this is an independent competitor in the field. And people, you and I, eventually can buy shares into it. It's now a globally competitive company. So it helps in that regard. But you see, the Petroleum Industry Act is one part of the thing. Enacting the act is one part. Implementing the act and stewarding its progress is another one. So we have enacted, but so have so many laws been enacted. I want to take the optimistic view that we are going to be very clinical in our implementation, and that's the success of it if we can achieve that.
Okay.
All right, now let's look at this. We are known to produce low sulfur content crude oil.
Yes, very. That is the holy grail of, of the crude oil market.
Beautiful. Now, what's the demand for this kind of crude oil first?
It's the darling of the among all petroleum products. It's the darling, because one, it reduces the amount of processing you have to do down line, right? So it's very much high there. But at the same time, that being said, we have to understand that there are new players, new volumes, new technology that are defining a lot of the frontiers that were not previously big players, are becoming very large players in that field, and they're getting low sulfur as well, low sulfur crude. So yes, it puts us at a positional advantage, because Bonilite is one of the highest demanded product in the crude oil market. But then again, we also have to balance that because new players are coming in with huge volumes of such as well.
Okay, and what's the future for our kind of crude oil, knowing that we have other players who are bringing more volume?
Yeah. So the future, generally, I would always say I do not see an energy mix that will not have a predominant fossil fuel will not have a predominant role, right? But then again, we have to also look at it. Over the future, we need to transition our ideology slightly. Fossil fuel would always be dominant, but it would move to gas. If you look at the COP26, for example, which was where a lot of advocacy was done for climate change, that clarion call is calling for us to meet certain targets to drop our carbon footprint.
Emissions,
So now you're going to find a lot of manufacturers, you're going to find a lot of users now transition to gas. So I'm less focused about the crude. Yes, the crude will continue to sell, right, but may not have increasing volume just because of the external factors that are militating against crude as a product versus the gas, products, which are more environmentally friendly. So yes, there will always be a market, but it may not be increasing. Rather, our focus should be harnessing the gas. Now, let me also state that Nigeria, I will not be wrong if I say Nigeria is a country of gas with some quantity of crude. Because if you look at the gas volumes we're even talking about, right, those gas volumes, about 203 trillion cubic feet, is what they've proven. Those gas volumes have been achieved just by exploring for oil and at this, accidentally stumbling on the gas. Imagine the fortune that could behold Nigeria, just like Mozambique, if we now intentionally begin to explore for gas.
Now, talking about gas, we've seen the issue that has been certain River State quite recently, the suit precisely. And it could be as a result of gas flaring and also the illegal refineries in that angle. How would you say, the practice of gas flaring can be, minimized, if not completely eradicated in Nigeria?
Yes, the practice of gas flaring is a very concerning one. And it's sometimes the silent killer, and you're only lucky if nature allows you to even see what the effects are, from your environment. But do know that whatever effect you see in the environment is just the tip of the iceberg compared to what's going on within your body system. The way to use gas is to begin to look at, we're talking about we're talking about decarbonization. I have written several papers published in the Nigerian Oil and Gas Conference, the Nigerian International Petroleum Summit. And I say, if we look at decarbonization in isolation of a commercial framework, then we will now be counting our costs and saying, instead of our profits, we are reinvesting this money to actually decarbonize the environment. One way to look at it is, okay, how can we create something financially rewarding out of the decarbonization process?
Okay.
Now, I'm pleased to tell you that I've been very instrumental to developing some of those when we were looking at the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program with the federal government.
Okay.
Now, that is in the pipeline. What that is meant to do is to award the flare sites. There are 178 flare sites. Award those flare sites to people, companies who wouldn't take it, and then aggregate the volumes together, and then create a commercial quantity which will be processed and then sold, right? But that's just not the end of it. Now there's still the idea of flaring due to process upsets, right? That we can do some carbon capture. You can feed that into carbon capture. Now, the third is we need to understand that there are actually viable carbon products that could be used. We just need to create a market for it. And market in this instance is going to be supply driven. There are markets that are demand driven and the ones that are supply driven. By that I mean, you begin to capture. I'll give you an example. The fire extinguisher you use, it uses CO2.
Yeah.
Yes. And sometimes, so by the time you begin to capture this carbon and create an entire new industry that begins to process and sells to people that are actually using this product. For chemicals, they're used. Then you create a monetary basis within which decarbonization can thrive. That is the way to do it sustainably.
Now, it sounds all nice and juicy. Do you think this is implementable, and how soon do you think this can actually function?
First, I feel it is implementable, right? For example, but you see, the regulators need to give some confidence to those who are investing. I'll give you an example. The Nigerian gas flare commercialization was rolled out. Companies were called to bid for the product. But there were some market frictions that were yet to be solved. I'll give you an instance. The market, you look at the flare sites, some have very large volumes. And there is a minimum quantity of, flare volumes that you need. And with the specific constituents that you're looking at to make your profit when you begin to work your maths. So they needed to aggregate. But when you are talking about aggregation, who is going to play the midstream role? The midstream role is very critical.
This conversation is live on Facebook and, of course, on Instagram, where the handle is Spectrum TVNG, and the website is www.spectrumtv.ng. Let's jump right back into it. Nigeria is the 9th largest country with gas reserves. Now, the question is, why has that not translated to the cost of cooking gas, especially in Nigeria, in fact, particularly in the Akwa Ibom State? Yes, because the other day I went to buy gas, it's 700 naira. Okay, G.
Let's not make it very particular about that.
Okay, well, let's go there.
Okay, so let me tell you some fundamentals that underpin our gas system. First, you have rightly said reserves. The other end of the statistics, which you need to quote, is what is the daily production and what is the daily consumption. The differential of which is going to be export and flaring. Okay? When you put all the statistics in place, it becomes clear what is going on. Now, even more clearer is going to be the fact that when you look at cooking gas, you find out that we are producing only a minimal percentage of the actual cooking gas we consume. What is influencing what you are buying is importation. We are importing.
We're importing cooking gas.
Yes.
Why?
I will explain.
Please do.
Now, you see, sometimes I would liken the Nigerian economy to a phenomenon of pressure in engineering. Pressure goes through the path of least resistance. Nigeria loves the path of least stress. We don't like stress now.
Nigeria, you say, or leaders, because I feel Nigerians don't like stress.
We don't like stress now, is that what I'm saying? Naturally. And that filters into the way we approach leadership. It is far easier to get the gas, liquefy the entire thing, and sell abroad. So that's where it is headed. That's where it is headed. It is also far easier to take this gas, minimal work, and use it to drive power turbines. Far easier. When you start to talk about processing it to the level that it could be used for cooking, then the processes are even longer. And the returns, people look at it, do I need to do this? So over the years, that has meant that a lot of the volumes that should have filtered into a domestic market has now been sent out there. So first and foremost, a lot of our volumes were sent out there. The next is the gas to power was now the highest consumer. And we know because consumers don't really pay their bills, at the fairness, the non-metering was a problem. That has made gas to power the highest debtor when it comes to gas utilization. So that means that the real gas consumption in terms of cooking is now suffering, and that deficit has to be filled by importation. So you are paying to the gas value chain where you are, which is consuming for cooking, using for cooking, you have to import to fill the gap. Because gas for power has taken precedence, gas for chemicals has taken the volume to even have, and then of course, running the industrial plants have taken the volume. So the one that you are now using, you have to import. Now another thing, you import. You look at the role that, you look at how many ports we have. For some time, we had a lot of traffic in the Papa. And as such, a lot of pressure was mounted there. We had, some level of scarcity over some time. And then that drove the pricing really high. So forex pressures, the pressures of just having one port clearing all the volumes that we were expecting, so that drove the pricing really, really high. And that's what I'm trying to explain fundamentally, why you are experiencing what you're experiencing.
But why would Nigeria be exporting when there is need for domestic use? What is the process of refining, or what does it take to refine cooking gas?
See, the truth is the dollar always goes where it is least threatened. There are uses, but how many of consumers are ready to pay? It makes business sense. If I get it, let me explain to you. I get gas out. I'm about to do an FID, final investment decision on a gas project. I look at my gas volumes. I've negotiated a price for buying my gas from a supplier or a producer who is just looking at gas as a byproduct and is not interested. And then I come over to a company abroad and say, look, can you offtake this gas? He says, yes. I'll give you offtake at so and so price for a minimum quantity of this for this amount of years. On the bankability of that, I approach a bank and say, hey, this is the kind of profit I'm going to make. Please, can we strike a deal? Give me some money to construct my facility. And then he gives me that money to construct. So the problem is there is bankability when it comes to international export. And it suits very ideally when you're raising money for business. Bankability, on the other hand, you can't guarantee for the domestic market. And these are some of the provisions within that the Petroleum Industry Act was attempting to correct. These are market frictions that are not allowing the domestic market to thrive and allowing people to be intentionally interested in getting into investing. Because how do you get your money out?
But I mean, they don't share cooking gas. People buy it.
No, yeah. You see, let me let you understand something. Nobody, when you hear about the Pareto 80-20 rule, when you are talking about, they say, 20% of your business accounts for 80% of your profits.
Okay.
You don't go into business targeting the 20%. Now you are coming from a passionate standpoint because you are a consumer. If I'm a businessman, cooking gas is not going to drive my investments. Cooking gas is just okay. It's a fraction of it. What drives my investment is the big off-takers, like power. What drives my investment is if there's an industrial hub. Say you build a gas park here, or industrial science park, powered with a gas turbine, and I'm going to negotiate giving them gas for a long time, and they will pay me for it. And in turn, they will give people power, and people will pay me for it. Industrial estates. That's what drives the decision. So by the time you put the maths together, it is not cooking gas that will drive a gas production. Because the money, no matter how much you pay, it will not even meet up to 15% of
Well, we look forward to that Petroleum Act being implemented in the fullest.
Yes.
In the fullest. And I feel maybe Nigerians should start agitating for the full implementation of that particular act for the safety of all Nigerians. Because...
And availability of gas.
Of course, availability of gas for a common Nigerian. But looking away from that, issues with the quantity of petrol consumed in Nigeria has been going back and forth at the with the federal government, with this one coming with a different figure and this other one coming with a different figure. What's the true situation of that? And would you support, would you say it is ideal to take out subsidy at this point where we don't have any functional refinery?
Okay. So those are two inflammatory points in the Nigerian petroleum economy, right? Sure. Because it touches the lives of the average person. Now, as for the numbers, I don't believe that we have the numbers because I don't believe in numbers in isolation of the process within which those numbers were obtained. And I haven't seen a clear path that defines that those processes take into consideration a lot of the external factors that needs to be considered. I haven't seen that. However, what I think they're just doing is using experiential figures, right? We bought this amount of crude. This is how long it took us to deplete it, so we're going to average it out. This is what the average consumption is. And there are different bases, some more correct than others, but it's just a basis within which they estimate. Now, coming to the aspect of saying whether we should, remove the subsidy. Now, I would reiterate some obvious facts. Subsidy is, at this point in time, the obvious facts are we are not only subsidizing Nigeria, we are subsidizing West Africa. And I'll say that with reasons. Nothing in the planet under the current situation stops me from buying the petrol, whatever, or PMS at the price here through some network headed to Ghana and selling at the higher price. That's why I say we are subsidizing West Africa. And we know it's going on. Let's not tell ourselves lies. We know it is going on. Okay. Now, the problem is not the removal of subsidy. The problem are two things. After removing the subsidy, what substitutes do you have for the people? How ready are they to accept this substitute? We talk about auto gas. We talk about auto gas for the vehicles. You need to pilot a system that rolls this auto gas conversion system very quickly out to the people and ensures that they understand how to use it and it becomes something that can be piloted at a very personal level. That's the first one. The second one is after you've stopped the subsidy, what are you using the money for? Because the former CBN governor would say, you cannot, if you don't subsidize consumption, you subsidize production. You don't do you go to bank and get 10 million naira loan because you want to go on holiday and cook and eat? Somebody will look at you and say, you are not serious. You go to bank to say, I have this fantastic business idea. I've done my modeling, economic modeling, and I think I can make profits. And then you take a loan. What we are doing is subsidizing consumption. Now you say you want to remove subsidy and share money to hardworking Nigerians. The trouble is, first and foremost, people will become skeptical. At least the subsidy, we know that it touches the average Nigerian.
Yeah.
When you start sharing money, you can hear that they're sharing 5,000 to every Nigerian. You ask 100 people, you say, have you gotten your own? You say, which money are you talking about? So the problem with the average man saying don't, he's saying that in every, in every gain of what we call the Nigerian democracy, this is the only one they are sure they get.
That's the argument in public.
That is the argument. They are saying that this one we are sure, the rest we don't know about. This is the one that is our order, you want to remove it. But for you to do it, it makes commercial sense to take it at one. Because it will bring in competitors. I'll give you an example. Crude is flat at the same price everywhere, right? You pick crude in Ghana. You process that same crude, and then you sell at a higher price of PMS, for example. You pick crude here, and you are forced to sell at a certain price. The truth is, it has truncated your profit margins, and that discourages people from coming to invest in that sector. Now, even those that are investing in that sector, so what we need is a kind of hand-holding to ensure that people come in, maybe gradual, removal of subsidy. People come in and then create a competitive tendency, because you also don't want to create a free market system where only very few are in that place. It becomes a monopoly. Yeah. Before you know it, you create a monopoly, and one man will wake up and say, I'm selling PMS at 500. Nobody will talk. That's you see what's happening to cement now. Yeah. It's going this way. So that's exactly what, we must be careful. I think the federal government needs to reinforce that confidence in Nigerians, that if you take out this money, you use it for what you say you use it for. If you take out this money, there will still be some consumer protection initiatives.
Now, at some point, let me just cut you there. At some point, during Goodluck Jonathan's administration, part of the subsidy was removed.
Yes.
And it was said the percentage that was taken out was going to be used to revamp refineries. So far, so good. Nothing tangible is coming from that angle. Now, what is the guarantee that, peradventure, the full subsidy is removed, that something will be done?
See, that's the thing. It's the same question you and I are asking. We are asking me, I'm asking you. So if you ask me, now who I go ask?
Oh,
it's the thing. We don't see a clear confidence, because it is at some point they'll tell you there's a difference between president and presidency. So if you're wondering who is controlling what. So, but just to answer your question, it's the confidence that Nigerians need to see whether, if they are going to be honest about how they will go about it and what they will use the funds for. Okay. For me, I just feel we are misfiring if you are talking about sharing money again to Nigerians to alleviate. Because I want to know, how do you do? Is it BVN? Is there some statistics your bank will send and say this is his average earnings, so it doesn't qualify? I need to understand the objectivity behind that. If you are saying you doled out 5,000 to how many millions of Nigerians, and I've asked all my neighbors, it's questionable.
Okay, now let's still talking about the economy as far as petrol is concerned, petroleum products rather. Nigeria is, as far as Africa is concerned, is one of the largest and oldest oil-producing countries in Africa, and which accounts for about 90% of our exports, actually. Yes. And about 80% of our revenue, so to speak, as a country. Now, where do you see Nigeria in the next few years, putting into consideration the calls in many quarters for diversification of the Nigerian economy? Where do you see Nigeria there?
I'll give you two pathways,
All right.
because I can't say for certain where the pathways are. If we take the call to diversify our economy, then I see Nigeria definitely to expanding. Especially, I would ask them to expand the GDP contributions of the oil and gas sector, because you look at it, you've quoted some fantastic numbers, but also embedded in that is the fact that the GDP contributions of the oil and gas is very small, and that's a problem. What the indicators of that is that we are still dealing with economic rents. We haven't actually allowed the oil and gas to trickle in and begin to develop our GDP data, and also as well as develop our economy at large, right? So that is one of the focus that we need to do. We need to now use the oil and gas sector to truly power the economy and not just collect rents. That's one thing we need to do. A case study is what is happening in the UAE. It's the same oil now, but they've actually been able to engineer it to power the economy and other sectors. We need to be determined to do it. Now, two, going forward, I think, as I said, the oil and gas sector is moving from volume to value base. Underpinning the success of the value base is collaboration. We need to start collaborating with other nations. We're not in this alone now. It's a global affair. We need to do that to be together. Then three, if we are going to even make prosperity, financing is very key. Energy financing is not something. Let me even tell you what the success and failure of the oil and gas in the long range is going to come from how we're able to effect financing for our projects. AKK is one. AKK pipeline was actually, trying to power the north with a lot of gas for them to do their industrial plans. That pipeline project has been stalled because our financiers, the Chinese guys, have pulled out. Now you also have people like BlackRock who are saying that they will not fund any project. I think from 2025, they're not going to fund any projects. In fact, they've reduced their footprint, and by 2025, they hope to stop financing any project that has a higher than 25% carbon footprint, which affects the oil and gas predominantly. Now, what that means is that a lot of our plans are going to come to a halt. The same thing with Trend 7. We heard of LNG Trend 7, we're expanding our trend. Financing has created a bit of a stall. Now, for our future to even go, I feel the future is bright, but I'm telling you what we must correct. For our future to be bright, we need to begin to have energy financing in country. Because what we are doing is we are expecting others to fund it. And you can't expect people that frankly don't benefit. So look at the UK economy, for example. They are very fantastic if you take out the oil and gas. US economy like that. So are you asking and there are the people pushing for climate change and move away from oil completely. I'm pushing, and Nigeria is pushing for clean energy, not green energy. There are two different things. So if these are pushing for complete abandonment of crude, are you expecting them to come and fund your projects? Do you really believe they will fund it? Let's even take away the sentiment of how neat the energy is. Let's look at the political standpoint. If I was somebody on the other side trying to mastermind crippling your economy, I will bring up something like that and advocate that is the demon. We should, in the room, we should throw it out. I will make sure I trash your funding. And if you are doing proposals every day looking for external funding, then you are not serious. You need to actually come to the realization that we have to start. At least start internally with funding, proof of concept, grow your prototypes of your business, show that it is profitable, and show that it is driven profitably with the market forces, and then you can go and raise funding to expand. When we are actually doing groundbreaking, break ground, waiting for Chinese to come and give you money, 8 years down the line, you are looking, there's still no project to show. Well, that's what is affecting us.
Nigerians have really been on that spot for a while. But just quickly before, as one of looking at the future of oil and gas, this 21-story building done by the incumbent governor of Akwa Ibom State, here in Uyo was designed to have Mobile relocate its headquarters from Lagos down here.
Okay.
And so far, the case was encouraged, and they said there's a court order that they're not moving. Do you feel that can tangibly, improve the sector if they move, or how relevant is that?
Okay, it's good. Yeah. Second part of your question allows me room for navigation. Now, you see, yes, there may have been that basis of making, building the building for, Mobile to occupy, right? But in the grand scheme of things, you need to understand that there are different fundamentals that affect why businesses are placed where they are placed. A lot of businesses are placed, for example, look at who are the partners of this company. They don't operate in isolation. They have partners. What is the proximity to their partners? You want to get into a government office that you're also partnering with. How quickly can you get in there and get out? That's some of the things that drive the decision. Now, in terms of relocating, they're still going to pay rent here. Only that it will now create, maybe coming to be resident will create a kind of a commercial hub around the environment of Uyo. And
of course, they are operating here, they are draining off from here. Don't you feel it's natural or okay for them to host here and maybe give back to Akwa Ibom in some way?
That's what I'm saying. You must consider the argument from both sides. If I speak as an Akwa Ibomite, it is comfortable to come here. I would love them to come here, right? But I also have to look at the other side. What the argument is, you want to go into a government parastatal very quickly. How do you do it? But again, you see, the other argument is now the post-COVID realities. With everything being online now, it may create an argument, but that is still something. Then the other side is, what if there's a long-term rent there? Commercial entities don't pay rent for just 1 year or 2 years. Sometimes they block book their rents for a decade. So what if there's a long rent? Does it make commercial sense that, say, you've paid for 10 years, you now move? I don't know the fact of the matter.
This didn't start now. There was an argument at some point during Governor Victor Otta's administration that they come back. But the argument they had was that there's no building, no structure that could accommodate them here, which I believe is what gave birth to the 21-story building. So would you still say they have a good grounds not to move?
I don't even know their full grounds. I know part of the grounds that are plausible.
Okay.
So that is, you see, when you are commenting on matters, you must know the entire facts of the case. I know some grounds, but not the full grounds. But as I said, for it to be an argument means that both sides have good merits for what they are trying to bring to the table and it's on the basis of maybe an agreement that they will say, okay, let's move. It may even be, what about the relocation cost? Who foots it? Once you do that, you have to pay the staff relocation amounts. Who is going to foot it? If I calculate, okay, I say move Spectrum TV and you have 40 staff. I say move it to, let's say, Cross River, and there's something in your contract that says I have to pay you, say, 1 million, for example, for moving. The CEO asked me, okay, it's fantastic, I love to move, but who is going to pay? Who is going to pay this amount of money? So there are different dynamics. You see, I like to be well informed about the facts of the matter. There are several arguments, and the state government will tell you they are not paying. Do you know the amounts and the amount of people? You do 500 times whatever figure it is, that's a huge amount. I'm just giving you a figure. That's a huge amount. Who foots that bill? On what receipt do you write the bill? Is it CSR? Profit? And then you have to look at the logistics cost of traveling for your meetings and lodging in hotels. So there's a lot of things that drive that decision. Okay. I'm just kind of postulating on some of the factors. That is by no means all the comprehensive factors. And when you bring it to bear, you'll be able to see, these people have some argument too. Even the government has some argument. Which argument is economically driven? And which of them is sustainable? Because you can't ask me to be doing things that is going to make me a loss. And you expect me to do it in the good of the country. No, I will not do it.
Okay, very well then. I want to believe that. But just before you go, now if you had the opportunity to speak to persons concerned, as far as the industry is concerned, what are the key things you would say?
I would say that the Petroleum Industry Act has given us a very huge opportunity to reform, and I'm glad that after 18 years in the works, it's actually gone through, right? The implementation is very clinical. The implementation must be very clinical because, see, the oil and gas industry is a global affair. It's not about the Nigerian factor, and the country, the world is not going to wait for Nigeria, okay? So we need to have the lawmakers, the implementers of the Petroleum Industry Act all come together to make sure that in the way it was intended, that it is implemented and we bring back confidence to investors. Once we have investors rushing and this hope, and we keep reviewing because I'm not of the idea that the bill is perfect. There's always room for improvement. Yeah. We must always compare our competitiveness with other nations because, as I said earlier, the dollar will always go to where it is less threatened. And that is how investors think.
Well, many thanks for sharing your thoughts with us, Dr. Enang. It was great having you on the show.
Thank you.
We send our regards to the people in the oil and gas. And please, they should start refining cooking gas. We'll pay for it, okay?
Can you give me a bankable contract for the next 10 years?
Sure, we would. You know, we'll do a
work it out.
conglomerate of people and work that out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for being on the show.